Cool. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here. This is my home state in Ghana country. We are on near the river, the Karawara-Piti. It's a really sacred meeting space, and that's what we get to do at the Convention Centre all the time, so thank you. As you gathered, I'm here to chat about periods, and I thought we'll start off with some facts. So obviously, hopefully it's obvious to everyone, about half the population bleeds for about 40 years of their life, most months. There are many methods of managing menstrual blood. So we've got pads and tampons, cups, underwear, your choice. Here's a laundry tip. If you have a blood stain, you should never use hot water, always cold water. Hot water will cook the blood and we'll never get that stain out. So you can take that one home. The other really fun and obvious fact is none of us would exist without menstruation, obviously. But according to our policy and the way that our systems are designed, it's not so obvious, but it's very true. Some of the less fun facts that I am very aware of is that currently in Australia, 1 in 5 girls are not going to school because they cannot access or afford period products. We also know that, broadly speaking, menstruation brings people a really deep shame and discomfort with their body and understanding and expression of who they are. We also know that from the ages of about 12 to 15, girls are dropping out of sport at rapid rates because there aren't conversations about their changing body and how you can navigate the things that you love, like sport, and navigate that change, and period blood as well, really basic kind of methods of management. We also know that from June 1999 until January 2019, we had a GST on pads and tampons. Meanwhile, Viagra and condoms were GST-free because they were considered a necessary product, but period products are a luxury item. So there's some scene setting for what we're here to manage. The term period poverty is something that I use in most elements of my day. It's a pretty new term, and it really just encompasses the experience where someone's not able to access period products. Myself, about 6 years ago, I kind of thought that this must be a problem in a lot of countries internationally where maybe access to other basic healthcare will be difficult to attain. But that is not the case. Unfortunately, period poverty is a really big problem in Australia. As I mentioned, 1 in 5 girls are missing out on school. And there is, significant consequences that are arising from period poverty. Although menstrual health care education is mandatory, it's very poorly, it's really inconsistent. Often it's the young PE teacher that's there teaching, sex ed, here's how to use a condom, and by the way, this is what discharge is. And look, not too many young people are cool to then follow up with questions and then be honest about, oh, I'm actually, experiencing really heavy flow, is this normal? There's not really a space for that. So what we have is a general population that is really awkward about the conversation of menstruation. Thankfully, my partner is wonderful and he lets me share this story, but an example being when myself and my co-founder, I'll get to more about Taboo later, we went to travel to learn about what period poverty was like in Kenya, India, and rural Australia. Remember in Kenya, myself and my co-founder, we were putting a pad on a pair of underwear and showing everyone how, this is how you use a pad. And my partner Sam at the back is there taking photos. And then after he comes up to me and he's like, oh, I thought you put pads on, like you stuck it to like your body. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, how would that work? But then before I could really tell him how silly that was, I had to catch myself because I thought, oh, you're just this guy who's gone through the education system, has a pretty standard life, and somehow this is how you thought pads were being used. And then I started to really think about whose responsibility it is to take that ignorance. And that was ignorance, thankfully, he was willing to share and learn from. But I couldn't be angry at his ignorance. I had to be angry at the ignorance that our systems allowed to breed. And I also think the likes of, the GST and other really systematic ignorances about access to period care come from this basic access to education. If we have young people in the school system who might not have a period, not learning anything about menstruation, how do we expect leaders and decision makers to consider that as a part of our life? And the stigma and the shame associated with menstruation is what is really fueling period poverty. We have young people who can't afford period products and just don't have the confidence to ask their teacher for a pad because it's not a welcome discussion. So part of the kind of discussion on period poverty is we have to start at the stigma, and we have to start at the conversation and language. It's so important. You might be wondering why I know so much about this. It's really what I've committed the last 6 years of my life to. So I run a social enterprise called Taboo, and we sell period care in Australia, and all of our profits are committed to ending period poverty and improving access to period care for everyone who needs it in Australia. Here's a commercial we made a couple of years ago. There are a few things that are a little outdated. For example, we changed our name from Taboo Sanitary Products to Taboo Period Products. When we started, that was such a common terminology. And then as we progressed, we thought, sanitary is not the right word here. So we've changed our name since, but the system still works pretty similar. So I'll show you this one.
Period.
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 No, we're not talking punctuation, we're talking menstruation. Are you surfing the crimson wave? Has Auntie Flo stopped by for a visit? Whatever you want to call it, Taboo Sanitary Products is here to see you through it. Hey, that's soft. Probably because it's 100% organic cotton. And it's durable. With wings, so you can fly through your day leak-free. Tampons are available too, of course. Both products are made using green energy and are packaged in recycled cardboard. Better yet, your pads and/or tampons can arrive periodically at your door via Taboo's handy online subscription.
Hey, I'm Isabel.
And I'm Eloise.
We're the co-founders of Taboo Sanitary Products.
Our mission is to ensure that people around the world have access to safe menstrual hygiene products.
And the right education to deal with their period.
In developing countries, 30% of girls will drop out of school as soon as they get their first period.
And 70% of reproductive diseases in India are caused by poor menstrual hygiene.
That's why 100% of Taboo's net profit is committed to ending period poverty.
We're here to offer you a top quality product that will arrive to your door every month along with your period.
But most importantly, we want to give you the chance to practically empower women around the globe.
Haven't quite absorbed all the information? Visit tabooau.co to find out more. Get it? Absorb. 'Cause
I love that video for so many reasons. Louis, who was the wonderful presenter of that commercial, he has just graduated from NIDA, so I'm very keen to see where that career goes. Doesn't go far for lots of actors, but he's wonderful. And another reason I love how we designed that clip is to really bring men into the conversation. And our kind of method of making menstrual health education and period products more available is just removing gender completely. We know that not everyone who bleeds identifies as a woman, and not every woman bleeds. So we really need to make the conversation available to everyone. But we also need to really remind ourselves in the same tone that menstruation is everyone's responsibility to understand, because no one would exist without it. And to have a young guy who's very charismatic, my mum's obsessed with him, we really wanted to open up that, just crack it on the head and make people feel welcome to ask those questions. We do a lot of school presentations, and the most active demographic of people in the audience are young boys, just so curious and so desperate to learn more because they don't feel like they have an opportunity to learn. So yeah, a really interesting learning from my experience. I might quickly talk about how Taboo started as well. So this was about 6 years ago. Myself and my co-founder Izzy, who you saw on the screen, we were in school and we learnt about social enterprise, this concept of selling someone something that they're going to buy anyway and then using that profit for a really important cause and purpose. So we're there, like we went to this conference about leadership to do school, and then we're walking along the beach after, and we were trying to think about all these things that we could sell to people and then use that profit for an important cause. And we're talking about chocolate and coffee and whatever else we were buying. And then we thought, oh man, like we spent a lot of cash on pads and tampons, and that's for a lot, like a big chunk of our life. And they're not that cheap. And of course, then we thought about, wow, if you were living rough and you really didn't have a lot of cash, that would be something that would be difficult to justify spending your money on. We also then thought about what was on the shelf, and all of the products on the shelf, almost still, apart from us in some stores, they're owned by big multinationals. So we're just making rich guys richer by bleeding. And we thought that's really not how this should work. And then from there, we also started investigating what period poverty looked like at a deeper level. And once we realized at the time there was 30% of girls in a lot of developing countries that were dropping out of school as soon as they had their first period. And being in school ourselves, we were so upset that there was this lack of access to education just because people's biology wasn't being respected. So really quickly we thought, okay, we need to launch a brand of pads and tampons. We're going to be the best seller in Australia, and we're going to use all our profits for this cause and make sure that everyone has access to period products. And that's pretty well what that's still our ambition. So we found all these manufacturers. We were making so many phone calls and emails and spreadsheets. And we had some manufacturers saying, like, oh, sorry, sweetie, we can't help you. Like, just really not taking us seriously. And, we sounded like 16-year-old girls, and we were in school. Like, where is that going to go? But we kept persisting. And one of our criteria was to have, obviously, a really good quality product, but one that was really considerate of the environment too. So once we decided it needed to be certified organic cotton, ethically sourced, and sustainably packaged, we had a few options, and we found a fantastic manufacturer who also runs their factory on hydroelectricity. We're like, great, these are the ones. They gave us a quote for $48,000, and by this point, I was slinging beers at a pub, paid my bills, but wasn't gonna really purchase a whole container of period products. So what we did is we went to the community. We put on a big crowdfunding campaign, and we asked everyone for 48 grand. After 2 months, we ended up raising $56,000. So we were able to buy our first container of pads and tampons. We shipped it over from Spain to Adelaide, and we hosted a big crowdfunding a big launch party with all of these crowdfunding donors just down the road at Mod. We had 400 people rock up. We had a live band, DJs and dancers, and it was this it's the best party I'll ever host. It was so fun. And people were celebrating a brand of pads and tampons that they could purchase that was contributing to something further than just managing their period blood. And that was a pretty cool thing to celebrate. The momentum really helped. We were then introduced into On The Run, which is a convenience store with about 200 storefronts in South Australia right away. So all of a sudden we had 200 shops showcasing our product. Then National Pharmacies also came on board, and since we're also stocked in Foodland and Drake's, so 2 other South Australian retailers. And yeah, we can't wait to grow that further. We also launched a Pad It Forward model. So as you might have gathered initially, we really thought period poverty was this problem overseas. We went to Kenya and India and did a lot of research. But as we launched our brand, we had so many community groups ask us for support. We had homeless centres, domestic violence services, rural health clinics, so many organisations just needing pads and tampons. And my boyfriend's mum actually was like, I don't need tampons anymore, because she's post-menopause. She's like, can I buy them for someone else? And I was like, Nicola, you're a genius. We're going to put this on the website. And that has now serviced thousands of people. We've donated more than 5,000 boxes of pads to people experiencing disadvantage at risk in Australia. And yet, period poverty unfortunately doesn't discriminate. There are so many organisations receiving our support. We also are selling direct to business. So one of my rule of thumbs is that wherever there's toilet paper, there should also be period products. And that's the best kind of mechanism to imagine what a period positive world would look like. We don't expect staff to bring their own toilet paper into work, so why should we expect them to bring in their own pads and tampons? We don't have pads and tampons in most hospitals in Australia. We don't have them in schools, workplaces, unis, public spaces, community centres. It's something that is totally overlooked, and the responsibility is always put on the individual. And as we know, menstruation is everyone's responsibility. None of us would exist without it. Hygiene is also a collective understanding that we should share toilet paper. So that's been a really exciting conversation to have with bosses. And yeah, quite a successful system of sale. That's really where we're positioned now, and I'm really excited for growth, and we're just kind of expanding the conversation as far and wide as possible. And yeah, we're really proud of what we've done so far, but we really need people in positions like you to influence and continue this conversation and make sure that periods are just not, as they have been, a forgotten element of life. Thanks. That'll do.
Thanks so much, Eloise. Let's challenge the audience. Yeah?
Yeah.
So you have on your website something called Pad It Forward, which is like a play on Pay It Forward.
Mm-hmm.
So what about if everybody here commits to going onto the tabooau.co website and, someone's already done it.
Please.
And to go onto that website and pad it forward so that someone can get their period products without having to pay for them. Okay?
Please.
We okay with that? Okay, I've got another challenge. What about if you are able to influence the supply chain at the hospital or healthcare service where you work so that we can get taboo products in those hospitals? Would that help?
I love that challenge, yeah.
Woo!
I love both those challenges.
Okay.
Yeah. And Pad It Forward only costs you $7 a month, so.
And also if you could pad it forward for someone. I mean, I'm in public, but yeah, I don't need them, but I could actually pad it forward for someone else.
Yeah.
I just want to share one last story before we finish, and that is I am old enough to remember when the adhesive sanitary pad was invented.
Yes.
Because before that we wore I don't know if there are any older people in the audience remember that we wore an elastic belt around our waist and a sanitary pad was attached to it. And my sister is 18 years older than me, and I thought I was cool, so I told her she could use some of my Stay Free adhesive pads. And she came out to me later that afternoon and she said, I mean, I get it, they're great, but oh my God, they're so painful to remove. So I think she was, I think she had that up the wrong way. So anyway.
It's a common story, yeah.
It's like a gentle wax.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a cheap one.
Quick one, yeah.